This is the problem with being a Maquero, using the Mac and trying to connect to the projector. I apologize, although I speak Spanish, I'm nervous. This is the first time that I've spoken at a conference where the primary language wasn't English, and I'm going to stick to English just to be confident in what I'm talking about. I think I'll be able to move a little quicker. So excuse me as well if I move a little fast. I was at out with a friend yesterday when I first arrived, and it was late. And we walked into another friend's office, and he was showing me his new office. And my friend is Spanish, and we walk in, and I tried making a joke, and it failed miserably. No one laughed, and they just looked at me like I was just from another planet. So I have a feeling that maybe some of my jokes won't work. So instead of jokes, I'm just going to try to make up for that, since I won't be able to keep your attention by making you laugh, probably. I'm going to try to make up for that by telling you why you should listen to me. So I work for a company in Grand Rapids, Michigan, the other side from Detroit, and I work on a team that does agile software design and development. We practice a form of software design and development that puts designers and developers in very close contact with one another. And the reason that we do this is we believe that it helps us create exceptional software products. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about building teams. Specifically, I'd like to talk about the importance of cross-functional teams. Teams that take people from two different disciplines and blend them together, and some of the challenges to building those teams. I'm now working in a management position in the company that I work for now, but my background is as a designer. And one of the challenges that we've faced in our organization is getting designers and developers to work together well. And as we look at some of the startups that all of you may be working in, and we have the pleasure of working with at times as well. I'm the co-founder of a startup in Michigan and also on the advisory board of another startup in Chicago. These startups have to work in very small teams. And when we work in small teams, we need people from different perspectives. And getting those people from different perspectives to work together well is exactly what I want to talk about today. So one of the reasons this is so important is because, as we can see on the web, things are getting faster. It's faster and faster. We are able to go from idea to having our concept out in the world and having people respond to it. Now you all feel a little bit like me. You're catching most of what I'm saying and wondering what the words are you're missing. I feel like that too, so sorry. Things are getting faster. We see this happening in the mobile platform. We now have the app stores on our mobile phones. All of these app stores that are available allow us to get products into the market faster than we've ever seen them before. And we're seeing it on the desktop. As app stores are being added to the Mac, to Windows 8 now has an app store. These software vendors are realizing they need to be able to get their software products onto these platforms faster than ever. And we're seeing it happen in the manufacturing process as well. As manufacturers are realizing the power of 3D printing technology and these sort of things, we're seeing the world move from a world of atoms to a world of bits. We've seen manufacturing move to China. Eventually, China won't be manufacturing either, and we will see that the world of services, the services we design, will be the primary thing that we're designing. And the experience of the products that we create will be the differentiating factor and the place that's available for innovation. But what does this mean? If everything's getting faster, especially for design, what does this mean for designers? Most of the designers I know don't sit back and say, I have plenty of time. Don't worry. I've got all the time in the world to get everything designed that you've asked me to design. Most of the time, designers are struggling to keep up. So what does it mean for the world to get faster? Well, one of the things that it means is because the path to market is getting shorter and shorter, it means that we have to respond to change faster. We have to be able, we are able to put our product out in the market, see what the response is to that, and then we need to design the change. And it means that we have to consider where are the possible areas to recapture some of the value and make our teams faster. Well, making our teams faster, this is a formula that Taiichi Ohno wrote about in his book on lean manufacturing. Taiichi Ohno talked about work plus waste equals our present capacity. Well, what does this mean? It means that the work that we're doing plus the waste that we've created is our current ability to create new things. Most of us don't want to hear that we're wasting time. Most of us don't want to think that we are working as hard as we possibly can, and we feel like we are, so we don't recognize where the waste exists. One of the things, so what I want to look at is what I call the 7 wastes of user experience design. This is very much based on Taiichi Ohno's work, the 7 wastes in lean manufacturing. So these are what I see as the 7 wastes in user experience design. First of all, waiting. So I just want to get a show of hands. How many of you have ever waited for a designer or developer to get done with their task before you could do yours? Those of you who aren't raising your hand are probably lying. Motion. How many of you have written a list that you would save until you saw someone in your organization later and could tell them about it? A list of things to talk to someone about later. Anyone ever done that? Made a list of things to talk to somebody about? How many of you have wireframed more of a product than would ever get seen, or prototyped more of a product than would get created? Have created more plans than would ever be executed? Has anyone ever done this? Seen wireframes or personas hanging on a wall that no one referenced by the end of the project? How many of you have built a product or a feature that would never actually get to the market? No one would ever actually use it. How many of you have built a product no one would ever use because it was unusable or undesired? These are all forms of waste. We are all wasting our most valuable resource. But there's one waste. I said the 7 wastes of user experience design. You'll notice there's only 6 up here. There's one waste that I think is more important than all the others combined. There's one thing that happens in information, for information workers, that we have to consider. And that waste is communication. Communication is the greatest point of waste. It is, now I just want to define communication. For me, communication is the transportation of information. Communication is the transportation of information. Now, if we think of communication this way, we think of it when we transport information by phone, it's a little bit better, if I transfer information to you in person, it's a little better than if I transfer it by phone, and a little bit better than if I transfer it by email. The inventors of the IP protocol said that they recognized that the communication protocol they were creating was unreliable. They talked about having a best effort delivery. And this best effort delivery was, I hope you will get the thing that I'm sending to you, and then if you don't, I will try again. And they tried to limit the loops of communication as much as possible in the IP protocol in order to make sure that information actually transported to the person that it needed to. And here's a novel idea. Information transportation actually also happens in our minds. When we are working, one of the things that happens is we have to transport information from our long-term memory to our short-term memory. And this happens every time we change contexts. So every time you change from one project to a different project or from one task to the next, you have to transport information again from your long-term memory to your short-term memory. And every time that transportation happens, it's critical. We have to transport information. But we also have to recognize that we have to look for ways to do it in the most efficient way, because if we don't, we're introducing waste into our own process. So as we look at this transportation of information, one of the things we have to look at is collaboration. How do we create teams that work together well, that communicate together well, and that can innovate faster? Well, one of the things that I recognize about teams is that we've all been indoctrinated into what I think of as the myth of the solitary genius. Many of us think that Steve Jobs is the reason that Apple was successful. Many of us think that Edison invented the light bulb. Neither of these things are true. Edison had a team of 17 people working with him for all of the inventions he created. There was this huge team of men who was actually working on these things. We should think of Edison as a collective noun, as a name for a group of people, a team of people that invented these incredible inventions. And the same is true for Steve Jobs. So when we collaborate, Dr. Keith Sawyer wrote a book called Group Genius. And he wrote in that book, when we collaborate, creativity unfolds across people. The sparks fly faster, and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But this idea of designers cooperating, of cooperative design, is nothing new. We've been talking about cooperative design for years. We've called it different things. We've called it co-creation. We've called it participatory design, and others. But what I'm going to be talking about today is pairing. Pairing is a concept that comes out of extreme programming, comes out of the Agile process, and it's a process that I think very easily transfers to design and can help our teams work in more cross-functional ways. My definition of pairing is two people working on a common goal, working toward a common goal on a shared artifact. It's two people working toward a common goal on a shared artifact. This is what pairing looks like for developers and design. For developers, you have a driver and a navigator working together on something. You have someone navigating, looking at the big picture of where we're going, while someone is driving at the keyboard, writing the code, executing. In design, pairing can look like what Cooper does at Cooper Design in California. They have they call their pairs a synth and a gen, a synthesizer and a generator. One person is there to question and think through the synthesis, the distillation of the ideas, and one person is there just to throw out new ideas, to generate constantly. But no matter how we execute pairing, there is a challenge. And Elizabeth Sanders of Ohio State University wrote in a paper this quote by Robert Young, which says, "I don't think this change, a change toward more cooperative design, will take place before the end of the century. We will have to suffer first from the lack of foresight of our forefathers. And after that, something radically different can come. But it won't come on its own. It must be prepared." At the end of the paper in which Elizabeth Sanders quotes this quote, she wrote, "We can see now, well into the next century, that this change towards cooperative design, would not come for many years. And we're still waiting, in many ways, for this change toward cooperative design to take root in our teams." But why? Why can't we just get along? Why can't designers and developers work together well? Why can't designers work with other designers? And here is where I come with some of my experience as a designer to speak to design culture. I think that Robert Young, when he was talking about the lack of foresight of our forefathers, he was talking about the formation of culture. And in design culture, there are some toxic elements that as designers, we need to understand and claim, and as developers, we need you to understand. You see, designers come from a hero culture. And in a hero culture, heroes work for awards. They do their design work in an attempt to get awards because in school, they worked for awards to get their first job. And when they joined the agencies that they often wind up in after that, they worked for awards to get the next client. They seek control. The larger your contribution to a project, the more glory you get. And they love to put walls up around that control they have. I am an interaction designer, not a UX designer. I am an information architect, not a user experience professional. And we throw these walls up around our discipline, subdividing our discipline in order to ensure that we know who to blame and who gets to claim the glory. And they have an expert mindset. Never question designers. And they worship originality. Because by definition, a hero must do something extraordinary. They work alone because they're insecure about revealing their own design process. They don't understand it. They fear it will be uncovered as derivative and therefore unoriginal. And they fear that it will result in a loss of control. Sorry.
Welcome back to the suitcase. It was always packed. It's that bad as to be ready to go any moment.
It's not really working, is it?
I can't tell the difference anymore between something that's good and something that's awful.
Well, very close. But the best idea always wins. And you know when you see it. Keep banging your head against the wall. And that happens.
What's that?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if you can hear what Don Draper had to say, but Don Draper has no idea what his design process is. And the only design process that he mentions is knocking his head against the wall in order to come to a design idea, which, as far as design processes go, it sounds very painful indeed. And heroes will reveal their work when it's ready. They revel in the power of the mysterious reveal. They hide their work and they reveal it at the right moment in order to control the conversation. In fact, designers are taught techniques like I was taught, the hairy hand. I will show you two designs. One is beautiful and wonderful, and one is my hairy hand, which is ugly and causes you to choose the one I've been manipulating you into choosing. As long as designers are manipulating the people they work with or for, they can't make friends. And designers who don't have friends are miserable designers indeed. And we have to get past, also within design culture, the culture of competition. Designer versus designer, designer versus coder, clients pitting designers, agencies against one another in order to win work, and creative directors pitting concepts against one another, and art directors even within their own concepts.
I gave you more responsibility than you didn't do anything. After you work 10 seconds, you bring me something like, we're gonna do this right now.
Don Draper says, I don't care if you work 10 seconds if you bring me something I like. Peggy doesn't understand her design constraints, but worse than that, Don Draper doesn't respect the value of the creative process and the hard work it takes to create those ideas. Ideas are fragile. And I want to close with this. Ideas are fragile. When they're first forming, it's easy to shoot them down. It's easy to kill ideas. It's harder to nurture them and grow them and iterate on them until they emerge from their awkward adolescence into something that's valuable to customers. So with that, there is quite a bit that I could share with you about implementing pairing within teams. It doesn't look like I can get to that right now. But those are some of the cultural elements that I think start to set the stage for what designers need to look at and what developers need to know in order to engage with their designers well and start to form cultures that will allow that. I'm wrapping up before I'm done wrapping up, which is causing me to not know what I'm about to say. Causes designers and developers to work together well. So thinking about those cultural elements. If you're curious about any of this and would like to find me later, I would be happy to share more about the specifics of pairing and how pairing can start to help get us further toward being able to see those teams work together well. Thank you very much.